The nightmare for leaseholders living in buildings they cannot afford to make safe is something this programme has explored at length. First, though, through the cladding scandal at Grenfell Tower and elsewhere, but also through the hazardous materials on the inside of some buildings, which means insurance companies won't pay out. All along, the government has been quick to stress it's the responsibility of developers to put things right. But with no compulsion, many won't be rushing to do so. Now a new building safety bill has come into place, but it seems to leave many of the old questions unanswered. Ben Chu takes us through some of the changes. Ben.
Yes, Emily. First, the positive news. The government's new building safety bill published today creates a new building safety regulator. Ministers say these reforms will simplify the existing system to ensure high construction standards are continuously met from now on. That's undoubtedly welcome and necessary. Newsnight has exposed how in Transport House in Salford, government issued guidance on cavity barriers at the time of construction in 2004 was not followed, resulting in a significant structural fire safety problem today. So the UK building regulation system manifestly needs to be overhauled and made effective. Yet, let's be clear, what today's bill does not do is resolve the problem of potentially thousands of residential leaseholders facing large bills, some as high as £100,000, to make their existing properties safe from fire. Remember, this was a safety overhaul that was prompted by the Grenfell Tower disaster in 2017, in which 72 residents died, a disaster which exposed the proliferation of flammable cladding on buildings around the country and inadequate fire safety systems. So what else is fresh in today's legislation? Well, it extends the right for residents to sue developers and builders for substandard construction from up to 6 years after building work ended to 15 years after. But there are major cost barriers to suing, and the developers might have gone out of business. And what if a property was built earlier than 15 years ago? The Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick says most buildings affected by cladding issues are younger than 15 years, yet it's certainly not all. And it's vital to remember, it's not just cladding that's the problem. As mentioned, Transport House in Salford, visited recently by Newsnight, was constructed in 2004, so would fall beyond the 15-year limit. And the fire safety problem there is the cavity wall insulation, not cladding. Here's the response from Transport House resident Matt Harris today to the government's bill.
I'm not going to be able to take a developer to court or sue them. In fact, my building's 16 years old. I wouldn't qualify for this, and nor would I know how to do this. I'm simply a leaseholder. I'm not a building owner. I work in the NHS as a laboratory technician.
What's the bottom line here? It's about money. The government has committed roughly £5 billion to help make buildings in England safe from fire, but estimates of the total expenditure needed to achieve that is £15 billion. So who will make up the potentially £10 billion difference? Government says it should be developers, not leaseholders. Everyone now agrees with that, but today's reforms do not ensure that will happen. The challenge for the government is this: if developers ought to be sued for substandard work that left buildings unsafe, why not first give the leaseholders taxpayers' money to fund any necessary renovations and then let the government sue the developers on the leaseholders' behalf in order to recoup these funds? Here's Matt Harris again.
Anybody who has a sense of morality knows it's not correct. Everybody has said the leaseholders are the innocent ones. Everybody has said freeholders and developers are the guilty ones. But you're not doing anything about it. You're not putting any legislation in place to make the guilty parties pay.
Yes, the state taking on the burden of legal action against builders would create an element of financial risk for the government. The legal action might not be successful, and ministers do have to consider the public finances and the broader public interest. But what campaigners are asking is this: why should that legal and financial risk be borne by leaseholders? Remember that the government is arguably culpable alongside builders. The government's regulatory framework failed, as today's legislative overhaul implicitly concedes. Emily.
Ben, thanks very much indeed.